Hi everyone, that seems to be working. I'm going to talk about what I've called short order Ruby. And really, the kind of metaphor I was going for, which I've decided now that I hate, is the idea of an American diner, where you've got a cook in the back doing short orders. There's a waitress taking orders from people sat on stools, and the orders go through to the chef. He cooks them up really quickly and then serves them up to you. And does everyone really know what I'm talking about? Kind of those kind of aluminium-clad diners with people sat on stools, everyone sat there alone, just eating chili. We've seen enough American films to know about that. And I like this metaphor for quite a few reasons. One of which is the speed of turnaround. I think sometimes we tend to be working on big projects and they're quite slow, and it feels like we're not just making a meal, but we're growing all the vegetables and blah, 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 blah. Whereas when you go to your greasy spoon, it's just, I'm on my own, I'd just like some breakfast. The point is to get the calories from the kitchen and into my stomach as quickly as possible. So it's that kind of programming, and I like it for that. I like it as well because there's kind of a lack of pretension about it. There's your cook. If you go in there and you order, I don't know, tuna and avocado with bacon and mayonnaise sandwich, the cook isn't going to say, "Oh no, that's awful." They're going to just make it for you because they do that. You know, there's no pretension. There's no idea that the cook has a special kind of taste that's right and a special kind of thing that you should be happy with. If you want to smother your stuff with brown sauce and ketchup, that's fine. So I quite like it for that reason. But I don't like it for other reasons, as a metaphor, because it implies it's something kind of slightly greasy and dirty and hot kitchens and slaving away for someone else on not very much. And, but it's a bit better than that. Because actually what I think these kind of really quick scripts, this kind of the magic we can do with just 20 lines of Ruby, actually turns us into wizards and witches, and we're actually doing a little bit of magic here, and we kind of talk about things being quick and dirty, and really we should talk about them being magical. And I'm going to talk in my talk when I get onto some of the Ruby stuff, some of the tricks that we can use to make these little ingredients of magic. Yeah, there's a chap called James Fraser who wrote a book who said that magic is sensing the hidden sympathy between things. And that's quite a nice idea, that we've got all these little bits and pieces, and somehow we can magically find how they fit together. So we start off with a bit of an anecdote, just to kind of fill this out before we get onto the fairly dry coding and techniques. And there's a thing on Twitter called eBeth Challenge, where somebody called eBeth, who I have no idea who she is, but once a week she posts a challenge up that all these people who are following her on Twitter respond to. And a few weeks ago she posted this challenge. The next day I want everybody to take pictures of their life, a day in their life, from dawn to dusk, just take pictures and post it on Twitter. I can't imagine why anybody would do that, but a friend of mine did, and afterwards he kind of got in touch with me and said, I've done all this stuff, but I know that the Twitter search only lasts so long, and all this stuff that people have done, all these pictures they've posted, all these tweets, they're all going to disappear. Is there anything we could do? Is there a way to get them into a spreadsheet? Well, well, okay, and I bet most people in the room are already thinking about how they would do that, you know. Oh, we'll use that Twitter API, and we'll maybe chuck it into a database to make it easier to parse the dates and so on, because you can do that. We'll maybe use data mapper to chuck into the database, and we can do things. It's kind of like 20 lines of Ruby, da-da-da-da-da, and you go, oh, yeah, I'll see what I can do. But you've already got what you're going to do in your head, so to speak, a little script to help someone out. And I think what we sometimes don't realise is that to normal people, this is kind of really deep magic. As far as they're concerned, we might as well be these people. We're making strange incantations, saying odd magic words, and yeah, this is Doctor Strange summoning a demon there. And I think that's what it feels like. And we sometimes kind of forget about these things, and we forget that even in our day-to-day jobs, which are relatively boring, and you know, we're taking things on databases and chucking them on websites, and taking things on websites and chucking them in databases, and we sometimes forget that we have this magic power. Which is that these computers, these things that we've all got, we can kind of control and dominate them, summon things at them with weird incantations that other people can't do. And this talk is a bit of a celebration of doing those kind of magical incantations. And the cauldron, I think, in which we kind of make our spells, is the Unix operating system. And if anyone here is using Windows, then I think you will find that your relationship with that is slightly less than if you're using a proper operating system. There's a real consistency behind the way things fit together in Unix that isn't in other operating systems. And we can build little tools and pull them together in the same way as kind of the conjurer pulls his magical ingredients off the shelf and piles them into his cauldron and makes spells. This is all very abstract, but we will get to Ruby very shortly. So, just a recap of why I think Unix is very good for this kind of thing. This is a really basic, and I think most people will be somewhat familiar with this, idea of a Ruby process. So if you went to the command line and you typed wc-l, that's a command to tell you how many lines are in a file. Is everyone sort of familiar with that kind of stuff? I can see people nodding. And the magic of Unix is all these commands tend to work in a similar way. They tend to be boxes in which on the one side you stream in some information, and on the other side out comes a stream of information. On the left side we've got what's called standard in, which in this case would be the file that you want to count the number of lines in. Pile that into wc-l. And on the right hand side is standard out. That's what comes out, and in the case of this command, what comes out is the number of lines in the file. There's also another thing which comes out, which is a stream of error messages. And that happens much more often than I would like, but hey. But mainly we're interested in pushing things into these little programs and getting them out again. And the magic happens when we combine these things together. So you can see I've got two processes here. One which is just going to output the lines of a file. And I know there are other ways to do this. It's actually going to concatenate every file in the directory that ends in .html. Pipe that into wc-l, and out on the standard out is going to come the number of lines in that file. So we can connect together these processes if they fit this model. So this model where you put standard stuff in and you get stuff out. I don't think that's too odd so far. Is this relatively familiar to people, piping commands together? Yeah, good. So here's an example of doing what used to be called a pipe mill, but I haven't heard anybody call it that for a long time, where we pipe together two commands, and the second command just goes over every line that comes through standard in. So in this case, we're gonna find everything in the directory that every file that ends in .html, and then in the bit in parentheses here, we're just going to go through each of those file names and zip them up. And again, there are other ways to do this, but I want to get that idea that we can chuck stuff in and then go through each line. And I've got myself, I promise there's some Ruby on the next slide, which there is. And this is how we can do the same thing using Ruby on the command line. there's a flag to the Ruby command, -e, which tells it to execute the next bit as if you were running it in a file. So, so here's a bit of Ruby code which says while gets, and gets just gets the next line from the standard in that's coming in, which in this case will be a file name, and then gzip that file name. Using a little bit of magic here, which is the first kind of thing to remember from the talk, which is $_. $_ is a magic variable that always contains the last thing that you get it. The last thing that you call gets on. So, so in that $_ I'm going to come through the file names. And this is a very common pattern to do while I'm getting these lines, do something to each line. And Ruby lets us do it a bit easier. The interpreter takes another flag, which is -n, which, let me just go back. If you see on the, yeah, on the previous slide, we're wrapping things in while gets, do, end. Oops. There we go. If we use the -n flag, it just puts that in for you. So the script will execute on every line that's passed to it, which is quite a handy kind of short form of doing this kind of thing at the command line. So just show you that again so you can, and that's just the Ruby -ne. And I tend to use that quite a lot, but I've not seen many other people use it, so I wonder whether it's a little bit more obscure or hidden and probably doesn't get documented that much. But then I tend to zip a lot of HTML files. The next bit of Ruby magic I want to show you is a special variable called argf. Are people familiar with argf? Yeah, a couple of people. When you run a Ruby command, there are various magic variables that appear. It's very much like Perl in that respect. One of those is argf. And that's meant to capture this common case where a lot of Unix commands will either take a stream on standard in, or will take a file name which then gets streamed into the command. So, for example, these two Unix commands here are equivalent. In the first one, where cat is going to take that file and put it onto standard out. Standard out goes into the standard in of WC, and it will present you a count of the lines, bytes, and characters in there. But we can shortcut that because WC will also take an argument, which is a file that then gets pushed into it on standard in. So there are two ways we're using WC here. One is to take input that's coming streaming into it, and the other one is to take a file name which it then automatically streams to itself. If that makes sense. argf is a global variable when you start a script that allows you to do that in Ruby. So if the script you're calling is set a file name, then it will pipe that file name through argf, and we'll see some code in a second and probably make it a bit clearer. Otherwise, argf will represent the standard stream coming in. So here's a really simple script using argf, which reverses. It's very similar to the pattern that we were using earlier with while gets. This is going to reverse every line streamed into it. Because we're using argf, we can also pass file names to it, and those will get streamed through. So, so if we have this script and it's saved as reverse.rb, these two commands here, are those big enough for you to read? Yeah. Those two commands there would be equivalent. And that turns out to be quite a handy pattern, because you can do your testing. Maybe you've got a big file that you want to reverse all the lines in. Well, you can do your testing on a small portion of that file by using something like head or tail to get a little chunk and then pipe it in, knowing that eventually the command that you write will be able to work by just passing in a file name. Which brings me to the first magical script, and this is really one of the first scripts I wrote in Ruby, or very similar. I couldn't find the actual one I wrote. It was probably a lot longer than this, so I pulled this down off the web. There's another magic flag that you can pass to the Ruby interpreter, which is very, very dangerous, which allows you to edit in place any files that are passed in. So what this script actually does is it adds a couple of lines at the top of every file that's passed into it. I'll just go through it so that that's clear. There's a couple of things to point out here. The first is the data section in a Ruby script. Where I say here, header equals data read. The data section in any Ruby script is the bit that follows underscore, underscore, end, underscore, underscore. And that's just a really nasty but quite hacky way of being able to have a load of stuff at the end of your script that's stuff you want to use in the script itself. So here, header gets initialized to this string of stuff. Then, using argf, we go through every file that's passed to this, and in this case, because we're using -i, this will actually replace anything that's output from the script will replace the original file. So this actually goes to and edits files, although the only way you know that is because of that -i, which is kind of a little bit scary and frightening, and but useful sometimes. Anyway, that was one of the very first scripts I wrote in Ruby, before anyone had thought of using Ruby to do web stuff. And I'm still not quite sure what I think about it, but I have used it at least 3 times in the last few years to add things to the beginning or end of files. So now I'm going to go on to a couple of other magic things you can do. If you write your Ruby programs in such a way that they fit into this Unix idea of a tool that takes standard in and chucks out standard out, then there are lots of other Unix tools that you can integrate with. There's a story here where I used to work for a startup, and one of the things I was supposed to do every week was update a spreadsheet that was saved on a safe drive somewhere with some monthly figures. And then everyone was supposed to look at it on a Monday morning and go, oh yes, those are the figures for last week, oh great. And of course, no one looked at it, and everybody knew that no one looked at it. So then people started emailing around the spreadsheet. So there were 5 people who were supposed to be putting numbers into this spreadsheet. And they're all emailing around this spreadsheet, which is getting bigger, to 20 people, 30 people on this list. And this keeps going on. And still, no one's looking at it. Of course not. You get a spreadsheet and an attachment, you really can't be bothered. So I wanted a way to put some of this data into the email. And the obvious way to do that was to do ASCII bar charts, I thought. And it works really well, because then people, you stick them in the middle of the email, and people, as soon as they've opened it to see what you're talking about, they've already seen the numbers. Because I wrote something which could take a table coming out of MySQL and just draw it as a bar chart, using, I say ASCII, it was originally asterisk, now I'm using clever Unicode block characters to make it look a bit better. That's for presentation only. But one of the things you can do in the MySQL client, which is what you get if you type MySQL on the show. I guess everyone has used something like the MySQL client. You can set a pager, and a pager is just a program that all the output gets run through before it's displayed to the screen. And it gets run using this standard Unix template, which is stuff gets streamed out on, streamed into the program on its stud in, and the stuff that comes out of stud out gets put into the field. Which means that inside your MySQL client, you can get it to draw bar charts for you, which is deeply cool. So I'm just going to show you the code that does this, and it's really very basic. And this is really what I want to get to. This is the first thing that really we're using these kind of Unix things and seeing how they fit into lots of different tools in order for you to do more powerful, more wizardy kind of stuff. So here's the start of the script, and this is the kind of thing that comes out of MySQL. You've got these tables that are formatted with pluses and dashes, and it all, well, you know, it's a bit annoying, but it's actually relatively standard and relatively easy to parse. So the first part of the script skips the first 3 lines, which we know are the header. Then after that, it just builds up a hash with the category and the value. So we're just kind of summarising it. There's a big regular expression which will parse this kind of stuff, which I haven't put on the slide, but I mean it's relatively easy for you to work out how to do that, right? So that's the input bit. That's using argf, which will take the standard in, or a file that's supplied. And the output bit, well, again, really basic. We're basically just printing out these blocks, the number of times that they appear in the table, doing a little bit of scaling to make sure that they fit on the screen. So, you know, really basic kind of scaling maths here, and using printf just to put them out. And that's basically it. If you do that, you will be able to do this and look really, really cool. For some definition of cool. I just wanted to make the point that pager mechanism within the MySQL client is really useful, and you can do some really interesting things with chucking the data out of the MySQL client into scripts. I think this is quite useful, because then you can copy and paste that into an email and send it to people and tell them that, look, Ruby is 200. What's the problem? So a couple of gotchas when you're piping all these commands together and connecting these things together and doing interesting stuff. What I'm doing here is just creating a loop that prints 1 and then sleeps for a second. I'm piping that into cat. And if anyone's got a terminal up now, you can try this, and nothing will come out for quite a while. Nothing will be printed to the screen. And you know, at first that's a little bit kind of confusing. What's going on here? And really what's happened is I haven't quite told you the truth. If I go back to my picture of, here we go, all like that. If I go back to my picture of a pipeline, I've left out a couple of details here, which is that in between these processes are buffers. There are, in order to make these things efficient, not write too much to the disk, in the general case, having a buffer here is quite useful, because stuff can pile out of here as quickly as it can into a buffer and then be consumed by this script as quickly as it can. But those buffers cause trouble for us because it introduces a delay into the pipeline. And for most of the time, that delay is useful because it makes for fewer file accesses, fewer network accesses sometimes. So it's a useful thing to have in there. But when you're writing short scripts, really you want these things to be going. You want things to be unbuffered. You want them to be connected together so that they happen as quickly as you can. So if I just go forward, we can tell Ruby not to buffer its I/O. So we can tell Ruby not to connect, not to collect this output before it streams it out. And the way we do that is using on any stream, and here we're calling it on stdout, you can set this flag called sync. And that effectively turns off the internal Ruby buffer for I/O. So things that are printed by the program will come straight out. And you know, you can pull up a terminal and you can try that, and you'll see that in this case, I think the internal buffers are 4K, I think, in Ruby. I don't know if anybody knows that. But it takes a while before anything comes out. Whereas in this case, the output starts coming out straight away. So if you're having problems where you're thinking, well, where is this output going? Why hasn't it come through and the rest of it? This is worth looking at. The next set of things I want to talk about is, up to now we've been kind of connecting commands together on the command line from the shell. But Ruby also is a very good glue language, so it gives us a number of ways to call commands from your script. Are people familiar with the backticks to call Unix commands? Yeah, lots of nods there. And another way to do the backticks is %x, which works the same as %r with regexes and %s with strings. Whoami is a Unix command here. And, oh, message. And using the backticks to call a command or to call a shell command is quite useful if all you're interested in is the output of that command. Because it's quite hard to send anything into this command. There's no way to attach a stream to it as we've been doing using the pipes. So if you're just interested in getting the output of the Unix command, for example the whoami command, which tells you which user you're logged in as, then this is the way to go. Using %x or the backticks, they're equivalent. One tricky thing is the output usually comes with a carriage return at the end. If you care about that, you can strip it off using chomp or something like that. There are other ways to call commands from Ruby. System and exec. And in these cases, if we were to call system whoami, the return value wouldn't be what comes on standard out from that command. The return value would be the return value which is either 0 if the command was a success or greater than 0 if it isn't. I think, having said that, and someone should check this probably, I think system returns true if it was a success. Is that right? Yeah, sorry, I was wrong there. So system will return whether the command worked or not, but it won't return any of the output. And exec will actually replace your process with the command. So if you call exec, you'll basically say, okay, I'm done with this script now, replace it with this command that you're running. If you do use system and you do want to get hold of standard out, I think you can do it using the $? Variable. Someone's nodding at the back there, so that won't be true. I tend not to use system and exec. It's important if you really want to know if the command has worked, but these kind of short order little scripts that you're writing to do clever stuff, well, you're doing them interactively anyway, you know. This is more for This is more for doing proper work. The other way we can connect to commands is we can actually do the equivalent of that pipe command in the shell using popen, which is pipe open. And here what I'm doing is, when we use pipe open, we can send things into that process, and we can read things from it. So here we're using the wc-l command again, which tells you the number of lines in a file. And what we get out of there is, it's a file descriptor, so it works exactly like a file. You can put to it and you can read from it. When you put to it, that goes to the process's standard in. When you read from it, you're reading from the standard out. So all this is doing is using that Unix command, opening a pipe to it, so it'll run as a separate process, and sending some text to it. You generally need to close the input stream before you get anything back from it, which is what we're doing here. So that text and then the end of the file, and then we're going to read from the standard out to get the result. So that's a really useful thing, popen, when you're trying to use these commands from inside your Ruby script. And just one thing to note here, just like a file, you have to say whether you're going to read or write to that stream. So you can open a read-only pipe and you can open a write-only pipe. I tend to always do this because it'll work. So for the quick things, just use that. This is another thing that you might see people use popen for. Is this familiar to anyone using this? Right. This is very much like the fork command in C if you've used that. What this is going to do is, instead of the wc-l, we've got an underscore here. What that tells popen to do is open a Ruby subprocess. So it opens a subprocess, which is a separate process running Ruby, and execution carries on in both the parent process and the child process. I was trying to think of a good example for doing this. I couldn't, but I thought I'd better include it anyway. There are better ways to do this stuff, but sometimes you have to. What it allows you to do is to basically fork child processes in Ruby, and for the parent process to keep hold of the streams to send things backwards and forwards to those processes. I'm sure what I'd like to do at the end of this talk is just ask people how they use these things, and I'm sure, I don't know whether anyone's got an example of using this for fun and profit.
Maybe a socket server.
Yeah, a socket server is good, but there are already things that just do that without you having to worry about it really. popen 3 is very similar to popen. It opens a pipe to a process. The thing that's different with popen, you can put stuff into standard in, and you can read stuff from standard out of that process. With popen 3, you also get access to the standard error stream. So if you care about errors, which, let's face it, we don't usually, you might want to use this instead. Whereas popen is a method on I/O and on kernel, popen 3 is actually, you need to require a library for it. So the next script I'm going to talk about is probably my favourite thing that I've done recently, which is I've recently got quite into these interactive fiction things. You know, it's text adventures where you're standing on a lonely road somewhere with a signpost, and you go north, and it says you are now standing. People played those things, or I'm way too old. Yeah. But one of the things about those text adventures, and there are loads like that, there's a huge community of interactive fiction people out there, is you basically play them alone. And in these days of kind of multiplayer death matches and the rest of it, really, if you're going to be sad and lonely playing text adventures, be sad and lonely with other sad and lonely people. So I wrote I thought it might be nice if we were able to play these text adventures using Campfire, which is the 37 Signals chat room thing. And it's surprisingly easy because here's a little bit of a... I tried to find an interesting bit of the transcript, but actually there aren't any. You kind of got to be there. But really, it's a lot of fun. So this is me asking James, what was up that mountain? And James saying, I didn't get that far. Anyway.
It was really hard.
I can't remember what we were playing. There's a command called defrots, which is a fairly well-behaved, not brilliant, but a Unix tool that will play these classic text adventures on the command line. So if you've got a file for one of these text adventures, you can run defrots and then you'll be able to play it on the command line on your own. But because it's a command line tool, we can use popen or popen3 to connect to it and then send stuff from a Ruby process into this text adventure interpreter and get the results back out. So here all I'm doing is getting those three streams, standard in, standard out, and standard error, for this interactive fiction processor here, and I'm going to tell it to run this file, which is one of my favourites, which is Sherlock Holmes and the Adventure of the Crown Jewels. Very good. I should say I've missed out a chunk of the code for connecting to Campfire and so on, but it's just a library, and you connect to it and eventually you get an object called room that you can speak to. And all I'm going to do here is use the select statement, which I'll talk about in a second, to connect to this Unix interpreter and just speak whatever I get on the standard out into the Campfire room. The select statement is quite useful. What that does is it takes an array of streams that you want to read from. It also takes an array of streams you want to write to and an array of error streams as well, but we're not interested in that in this case. We're going to take an array of streams that we want to read from, and the select command will ask those streams, do you have anything that you're ready to tell me? And we'll return an array of all the streams that are then have got something that you can get. So all this bit is doing is it starts a new thread which is constantly looking at these streams and writing the stuff into Campfire. So that's the write stuff like you are on a lonely road to Campfire done. That'll just work. Then it's a matter of reading what people say, so you can type go north in Campfire and passing that to the process. And again, this is really simple. The Campfire library gives you a listen command. And what I do here is I say, if you've written your command in uppercase, so if you've gone go north rather than go north, I'm just going to write it into the input stream to that interpreter. And that's it really. If you want to play interactive fiction in Campfire with other sad and lonely people, you can do it in like 20 lines of Ruby, which I think is magical. How am I doing for time?
Probably got about 7 or 8 minutes.
Okay. I kind of thought I'd be nearing the end now. I've got a final kind of grab bag of things you want to look at if this is interesting. There's the Ruby PTY library. Has anybody used that? That's a library that allows you to operate a pseudo terminal. So, for example, if you're driving a Unix command that's going to prompt you for input, so for example, maybe you're trying to crack someone's password, so you're filing things into password, or you want to change everyone's password on the system. Those commands will throw a prompt up on your screen if you run them from the command line. And there's not much we can really do to tell that it's a prompt. It just looks like a bit of standard in. The Ruby PTY library will help you connect to those things. You can use the expect library to get back the prompts and work out what to do with them. So if you want to drive a process that's more interactive, then that's the thing to look at rather than just these pipes of standard in and standard out. The second is a bunch of Mac OS commands that I find really useful for writing these little scripts that give us dominion over our machines. There's a couple called pb copy and pb paste, which when you pipe stuff into pb copy, it will put it on the clipboard. And when you run pb paste, it will put whatever's on the clipboard, will stream that out onto standard out. So that becomes quite a useful thing to connect. So maybe you've got something which ends up with giving you a URL. You can just pipe it onto the clipboard and then paste it into Safari or something like that. There's OSA script, which allows you to, from the command line, run Apple scripts, which are fairly horrible, fairly nasty, but sometimes they're the only way to automate some of the programs on Mac OS X, to close windows, to get certain things, and so on. And there's also a thing called folder actions, where you can attach a script to a folder and say, whenever files are dropped into this folder, run this script. And that can be quite useful for things like, I've got a folder that automatically uploads my photos to Flickr, for example. And it's really easy, it's much easier than any of the photo libraries and the photo applications that come with Flickr integration, for example. So folder actions are worth looking for if you're on Mac OS. There are similar commands and things on Unix. They tend to be more variable, so there's yeah, it's worth looking for. Command line parsing. Most scripts on Unix take a command line with various flags and so on. There are a lot of libraries to do command line parsing in Ruby. I don't know why, but it seems that I counted at least half a dozen of them. And they're all slightly different. I've heard good things about Trollop. I've not really used it, but maybe. Has anyone got any favourite libraries to do that kind of thing?
Of course.
Okay. Yeah. There are a bunch of them, and you'll find that it's really easy to do that. They're useful if you're writing a script and then in 6 months' time you're not going to know what the commands were, and it makes it easier to find that out. But write shorter scripts, and if you need to change the command lines, change the script. Then you've got things like this, the Ruby Demonize library, which allows you to put things into the background. Fork as well will allow you to do that, but really, I would use the demonize thing unless you're doing something particularly special. It will just create a process that will run and will return to you. And finally, there's a bunch of Unix tools that if you're going to do this kind of thing, you probably want to have a look at. Things like awk and sed and grep and find. They do make things a bit easier, and also reading the man pages, they're tools that people have thought about, and almost every feature in them is something that someone's found useful, so they're kind of quite useful for getting ideas about how to do things, I think. And that's, and that's really it. So just to come back right to the beginning, the part of my talk was really to say that we can use Ruby not just for web stuff and the rest of it, but we can use it to do little things to make our lives easier and the rest of it. And you can combine all these things together if you get familiar with the way the Unix scripts work and the way they take standard in and chuck out standard out. You can end up with a load of scripts that allow you to do really quite cool things and turn your machine into your own thing. I was thinking at the end of the talk just to ask people whether they've got any particular scripts like this that they would like to share with the group, but probably not going to do that because it would be really mawkish and horrible. But have a think about those processes that you haven't automated, even if they're only a few clicks, and you'll probably find that there are really easy ways to do it. And the Unix tools, when you get into it, are really very consistent in the way they tend to work. And if you write your Ruby scripts in that way, they'll live in that environment really well. And you'll be able to do the kind of magic that makes people think you're really cool. That's it, really. Any questions?
I just wanted to mention, if anyone wants to know more about this kind of thing, a really good book is Ruby for Systems Administrators by Apress, and it covers a lot of this sort of thing, including all of the Ruby online stuff.
Oh, cool.
Can you just repeat that for the recording?
Yeah, should I do the microphone to Luke?
I just wanted to say, if anyone else wants to read about more of this kind of thing, Ruby for Systems Administrators by Apress is a really good book, and it covers all the Ruby command line switches.
Do you want examples on GitHub?
Not yet.
So this is for everybody in the room now. I think that would be place to make really good little exercises. It's kind of like kata's or components. So the group basically wants to kind of upload their examples to GitHub. You know,
Yeah, I think that'd be really cool. I mean, one of the reasons that they're not on GitHub is often these scripts have passwords and stuff in them and so on that are just there. And so you can't, well, shall I put this up on GitHub? No, it's got my SSH password in it. Or it's got my private key pasted at the bottom of the file. And maybe that's one of the reasons that we don't share them as much. But yeah, the examples from this talk I'll definitely put up on GitHub and you can look at, and maybe other people can add stuff in.
If you search on GitHub for doc files, a lot of people have their scripts in repositories called doc files on GitHub.
Yeah, doc files on GitHub.
As I said earlier, obviously, the use of this is very similar to Perl. I assume you use Perl as well. Would you prefer one or the other, or would you move those to Ruby naturally?
I think you're right. I think this is doing a lot of the kind of stuff that the kind of workhorse stuff that Perl was used for. I kind of stopped using Perl when I realised that you see it when you close your eyes, you know, all those symbols and stuff. And I started using Ruby as a language to do this kind of thing, and I think it works pretty well. I don't think you have the same thing where you write a script and then 3 months later you go back to it and you have no clue how it works, which I have found with things I've written in Perl. And maybe that's just I can't write good Perl, but I find it easier to do this stuff. But yeah, it's exactly that niche that. Yeah. Okay, thank you.